All right. So our constraints, we've got 3 constraints, right? We've got memory, we've got hard drive, and we've got cases. Right? Those are the 3 constraints that we have. And our memory constraint is let me bring my notes so I don't have to lean over to see them. Our memory constraint is that we use 2 in the CP400 and 1 in the CP500. And we want to make sure that those are less than or equal to 1,000. Our hard drive is that we have B2 should be less than 500. In our cases, B1 plus B2 has to be less than 600. So this is very straightforward, nothing interesting or new. If we do that, I'm going to ignore the objective cell. Right now our variable cells are just these 2 values right here. Our constraints are that all 3 of these values are less than or equal to all 3 of these values. And we're set up with the things that don't change. Okay? So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to put deviation below, deviation above, right here. Alright? And our first objective that we said was that we wanted to minimize the deviation this value right here, right? So I'm going to add in some variables. You see what I did? So I added these 2 columns right here, which represent going below or above our goal case of CP400. You know what? I don't like that. I maybe like that. Goal 1, goal 2, goal 3, goal 4. That'll be better. All right. Plus. Okay, so I'm putting these deviation variables here, and I'm making the goal be how many I make, CP400, adding on any deviation below, subtracting any deviation above. That's going to have to be exactly equal to 200. So now I've got 2 new variables, that is those deviation variables, and I've got a new constraint, that is goal 1 better equal 200. And now we're going to minimize our objective cell here. In our first objective cell is we want to minimize, what do we want to minimize? For our first goal, what do we want to minimize? first goal is this one right here, right? Do we care about going over? No, we only care about going under. So our first goal was to minimize going under for that thing. So our objective is D7, right? It's going below this goal right here. We want to minimize this variable right here. We don't care what this variable becomes if it's too high. We just make sure that this is minimized right here. And we can solve this right now. Okay? That's a solution. Just produce the 200 machines, right? That meets all our goals. We haven't used too much memory, we haven't used too many hard drives, and we haven't used too many cases. So now we want, this is really important. This is what's new about these type of problems and using them on Open Solver before. We want to do what I'm calling locking in the first goal. We want to make sure that this new goal is not forgotten when we add new constraints and add new variables that represent new goals. So what I'm going to do in our model in order to do that is I'm going to add a new constraint. Specifically, I'm going to go to here because this is what we were minimizing, and I'm going to set it equal to whatever its current value is. So since it's 0 right here, I'm going to lock it in as 0. I'm going to make sure that it doesn't change by adding that constraint in there. Okay? So now anything I do to my model is not going to change that deviation variable accidentally. That deviation variable has to stay at 0. So now we can go ahead and put our second goal in. Okay, our second goal is that we want to have 500 machines. And that's going to be, I need to write it, 500. We have to add in DA and subtract EA. Add in our deviation below, subtract our deviation above. Let's try this again. This is where the 500 goes. This is where we put B1 plus B2 plus DA minus DA. Right. B1 plus B2 is what we are producing. We want that to be equal to 500. Now, we're not meeting our goal number 2, right? It's only making 200. We want to make at least 500. So now we're going to add to our model. For starters, we have to add those 2 new variable cells down here. So now we've got the machines, we've got the deviation variables for goal 1, and our deviation variables for goal 2, right here. And then we need to add a new constraint. I will modify this constraint right here to include both goal 1 and goal 2. And we're almost good. We've got our functional constraints that are always in there. We have our goal 1, goal 2 constraints. We have our deviation variables. Now we just have to change our objective function. We were minimizing deviation below for goal 1. Now what are we doing? Do we care if we go over making more than 500 machines? Do we care if we make more than 500 machines? No, and so we want to make sure that we minimize going under, right? So again, we're going to add that in there, which is DA. And now we can solve this again. And this is a new solution. Well, let's just make 500 of them, right? We have enough memory, we have enough hard drives, we have enough cases, and it's fine that we did 300 above our first goal, right? That's perfectly fine because that allows us to make our second goal, which is make at least 500. So what are we going to do now that we want to add in goal number 3? We're going to lock this goal in. What should we lock in? in order to lock in goal number 2? What value do we want to lock in place? What's that?
But on the second.
Yeah, we want to lock in this deviation below, because that's what we set as a part of our objective value. And its current value is 0, so we're going to put a 0 in here, right here. Alright? And now we can enter goal 3, which is our profit. So that's B1 times 200 plus B2 times 500. And again, we add in our deviation below, B9, we subtract our deviation above, B9. We're currently at $100,000. We would like that to be $250,000. Okay. So now I'm going to add in, again, our new deviation variables here for our new goal. I'm going to slightly modify these constraints to include all 3 goals. So we've got our variables, we have our deviation variables, we have our functional constraints, we have our goal constraints. The last thing we need to do is update our objective function. Again, do we care if we go above our profit? Do we mind making too much money? But we do care if we make too little, right? So we're going to add in D9 into our objective function. Okay, and we already know from our graph behind the screen here that we're not going to meet it, but we want to make it as close as possible. So when we solve it, we get, it looks like from here, if we look at here, yeah, we made our goal of $250,000, but no, look at our deviation. We were below our goal by $10,000. So we made $240,000 rather than $250,000. Okay, by making 200 of CP400 and 400 CP500. So you can see how that changed from the previous one. Now we made 600, and we don't have any above on this deviation. That's okay, because we kept this locked in at 0. If we didn't lock this in, then this goal would have said, hey, well, what if we made a couple more CP200 machines? We would make that objective goal of profit. So it's really important that we lock it in. We're going to go ahead and lock in this third goal. Because you could lock in this third goal at $10,000 and you still might have wiggle room on how you make $10,000. Some different amounts of man hours might produce the same amount of profit. So we want to make sure we do that. So to lock it in, what are we locking in this time? We're going to lock in this deviation below, right? Because that's what was part of our objective function. What should we lock its value in as? That would be nice. We have to lock it into its current value of 10,000. I'm going to go ahead and now add in proactively our new deviation variables. I'm going to update our goal constraints. And now we just need to enter in what our goal was. So goal 4 was we wanted to have how much time it takes to work. So that is B1 is 1 hour, B2 is 1.5 hours. Again, we add in our deviation, we subtract our other deviation, and we want that to be no more than 400 man hours. And then here, we want to do what we did up there. Now we do care about going over, right? We want to minimize not our deviation below, but we want to minimize our deviation above. So So we're gonna put that in E10 there. That's what we wanna minimize there. So now we can solve this. And unfortunately, it doesn't change because since we locked in the $10,000 loss, this was the only way we could still only have a $10,000 loss, is have that $400 of extra man hours than what we were hoping to. Alright? So I wanna make sure that you understand, when you're doing these, to incorporate these deviation variables, like we have here, you incrementally add these goals here, and you lock in the appropriate deviation variable, whether it's going above or going below, it doesn't matter, make sure you lock it in one at a time, and you update your objective function now to incorporate your newest deviation variable as you go. So that you can compute the new goal without destroying your old goal in there. Alright, are there questions about how we approach this right here? Alright. Why don't we, rather than me walk through this slowly one at a time, let you work on problem 14.4, and I will walk around here for the next 7-8 minutes here and see if you guys have questions. So work on problem 14.4 together if you don't have a computer or individually, and I'll make sure and answer any questions that you have about working on this one. Does someone need a book? I have mine, so I can let someone borrow. Fourteen four.
Thank you.
Do you like paper? Kayla, do you like paper and pen or something?
Yeah. Or you can type it on the notes. Nope. Anything will do. You can take a crayon.
Well, I think that's out of the
It's fine.
Would you like to use Expo markers?
Yeah, sure. I'll take it.
Oh,
All
yeah.
girls.
You have so many coloring options.
Alright, I don't know.
put up my final solution, if you wanna compare your solution to what I got. I'm not showing you the equations, obviously.